Hello, everyone. Welcome to our live stream. I'm joined here by Laura Lorenz, and we're going to talk
Hey.
about GitHub Actions and CI/CD with Prefect and some other fun stuff. But first, we need to talk about the most important thing, well, other than maybe us in the room, the Marvins. We got a couple
I did.
Marvins.
I brought my Marvins with me today.
Do they have different names, or are they both Marvin?
They're definitely both Marvin. I guess I haven't really renamed them besides Marvin 1 or Marvin 2, but this is a new addition to the collection. I went to KubeCon, North America in Detroit, saw some Prefect people. Like literally, we ran into each other in a coffee shop, so that was super fun and hilarious.
Right.
But yeah, this is the new looking Marvin color, and I feel like he's looking more like mature and a little moody.
We're gonna have a gray Marvin
So,
eventually too, and just
my ideal streaming setup would be if there was just like all Marvins everywhere. So I think if we can continue to proceed in that direction, then that's going to be the best.
it might be, yeah, we could go AI art kind of route, or
Okay,
we could go
okay.
physical too.
No, I
But
physically want to be surrounded by Marvins.
watch what you ask for. As you know, there may be many Marvins headed your
I
way,
know.
or
Prefect
large
loves
ones. I don't.
swag.
What's that?
Prefect loves swag.
Prefect
So
does love swag, and if anyone's following us on Twitter, sometimes or other places, you might see whole humans dressed as Marvin. So like there are
wow.
all different sizes of Marvins around there.
I should also get a Marvin costume.
I gotta imagine it's a little hard for doing demos, but
Maybe.
and you have a special skill. If anyone hasn't seen Laura's past Halloween special in full costume, definitely
Yeah.
worth a watch.
I was completely destroyed because I couldn't find my costume for this one. So, yeah, go look on the YouTube channel for a previous Halloween stream, and you will see this Marvin is featured. I've got an interesting outfit, and my hair was blue at the time. So, like today, I'm looking all professional, but what I really should be wearing is all blue for my costume. So,
That is the full prefect
right.
experience. Everything's blue. I'll
Yeah.
throw the YouTube channel here in Slack just in case anyone's Slack. Sorry, in the chat. We do have a
Chat.
chat window there. Feel free to ask questions as things are going along. Don't be alarmed if it takes a minute or two to get to them. But if you have any questions, do let us know. But I've got the link there, so you can check out our YouTube channel and follow us there. Follow us on Prefect Live. It's not a follow on Twitch; it's a subscribe, right, or whatever.
Right. Like, click, and
Like
subscribe, I
do
think
all
is
the
what we're
things.
supposed to say.
Yeah, exactly. All of the things. Awesome. Well, the prefect, the Marvins look ready. The
Yep.
prefectionists are ready.
They're born
Do you want
ready.
to take it away here, Laura?
I do want to take it away. Okay. Um, so my screen is already shared, I believe. And let me talk a little bit, referencing my notes here, about what I want to cover today. So already mentioned that we want to talk about CI/CD, particularly using GitHub Actions. So a way to seamlessly kind of tie in your development of your prefect flows and your like version control through GitHub to make that deploy your new changes of flows to Prefect Cloud with no extra bells and whistles automatically, and also annotate them by what their new version is using their GitHub commit SHA. So that's going to be like the main demo that I want to show you all, and I'm going to kind of do it like really quickly first to kind of show you what it's all about, and then we're going to kind of do like a deep dive so I can go through all the details. And then I am going to highlight a couple new features sort of sprinkled throughout or at the end. So just to give you the heads up about that, I want to show you the new cloud audit log. So we're going to look at what that is and talk a little bit about what the future of that is in terms of incorporating that into your great cloud experience. And then I also want to talk about there's a new feature that's useful if you have a like org tier subscription for Prefect Cloud about enforcing SSO login. So I'm just going to briefly show you that because it's like really seamless, easy integration. And then along the way, I'm also going to talk about prefect collections. So we'll be covering all of those things today. So yeah, I think those are all the stuff to look forward to. So I'm going to start again, as mentioned, with the GitHub Actions workflow. And I'm going to do it kind of the quick way first, and then I'm going to do it a little bit slower so we can walk through it. So here I am logged into Prefect Cloud right now, and I'm signed in here, and I'm going to create a workspace in my org here. I'm going to call it this thrilling workspace name of test. So let's do that. And in here, I'm going to actually pull over my, how do I want to organize this? I'll just put it here. Pull this over here, and I'm going to set my workspace just using this. So you can also, here we go, set my new workspace. You'll also get this screen if you go through Prefect. You'll also be able to set your workspace, sorry, if you go through Prefect login. So Prefect Cloud login and then sending your API key will ask you what workspace you want to join. So that's another way that you can set your workspace. Between Prefect Cloud login and or Prefect Cloud workspace set, you're going to have in your config set two variables, your Prefect API key and your Prefect API URL. This API URL is going to be referencing what workspace, and this is going to become relevant for the config that I'm about to do in GitHub. So let me slide over to this GitHub repo that I have to showcase here. And to configure the GitHub side of things, I'm going to do some stuff on my GitHub repo and a little bit of stuff over in my Prefect workspace. So first off, mentioning those two secrets, I'm going to go over to my settings in GitHub. I'm going to slide down to something called secrets, specifically for actions, because we're using GitHub Actions. And I actually have these set from before, but I'm going to change at least my Prefect API URL here to this one I set here, because again, it's per workspace and has like this UUID for the workspace. So I need to update that with the workspace that I just made. So one thing I need to make sure is that when you copy it from your terminal, I've made this error a billion times, so I'm just going to warn you now. Make sure that you don't have a new line there from taking it from your terminal, because I've made that mistake so many times. Okay, so I'm updating my Prefect API URL here in my Actions view. Ooh, fun. I need to authenticate. Please hold. Get my Authy up. Live and coming at you live from Seattle. Use your Authy, use your two-factor authentication, everybody. Okay, so we've got that updated, and then I already had set my Prefect API key, which hasn't changed. But I mean, I can just for fun grab that here from my profile and showcase that this goes in here. So now I have these two secrets set, and then the last thing I'm going to do is go over to my workspace, and I'm going to make something called a block. So we'll talk about this some more later too for people who are unfamiliar, but I'm going to add a block. In general, this is a way to store some configuration or potentially secrets that you could reference and code in your flows, and we'll see some more examples of that later. But right now I'm going to use it to store some metadata on the Prefect Cloud side of what my GitHub repository is that I'm using for this CI/CD experience. So thrilling, again, I will call it test. I need to provide, in this case, a reference. This GitHub type takes block name, reference, repository, and optional access token. Reference here is like a branch name or a tag. So my branch is called main. And then I need the URL of my GitHub repository. So let me slide back over here and grab this so I don't spell it wrong in here. So this is my URL for my GitHub repository. So I'm going to create that. Okay, so I've got a piece of configuration in Prefect that knows some information about my GitHub repository that I'm going to be pushing my flows to. My repository itself knows some stuff about Prefect Cloud in the form of the API URL and the API key. And so now I'm going to take us over to a repo I already have ready over here. So let me pull that into here. So I'm in this repo cloud 2.2, which is what I'm pushing up to this repository here. And I have just my first commit here, and I'm actually going to merge in some commits I already have prepared. But I'm actually going to reset back to this basic flow because these are going to be future conversations. So let me reset back to here. So in conclusion here, after some Git splicing, I have a new commit here called basic flow, which I'll go into detail after I just kick it off here. But the important thing is I have a new commit that has this hash 0b9 blah, 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 that has some changes to my flow that I am going to push up to this repository. So let me make sure, did that do what I wanted it to do? No, because I think I already pushed this up. Okay, let me back up one more case because I need to clean up my my remote version for my demo here. There we go. A quiet little repo over here with nothing in it. All right, now I'm ready to push this up. One more time, catch up here. So now I'm in a situation where my remote repo is back at this boring commit, and I'm about to push up this new commit that's changed here. I'll explain why that's fun in 1 second. So now going back here, I'm going to refresh here. I have these changes. And then if I go into my GitHub Actions view, you'll see that something is circling here, right? So this is actually a trigger that is configured over in the repo, which I'll show you in detail in a second, to have GitHub actually run the action of building my deployment and pushing it to cloud. So in here, you can kind of click in and see the status of it. It's going to take like a little while in the background, so I'll explain what's going on in the back. Oh, there, it was really fast actually. But it's composed of these different steps here that are going to basically do the deployment on my behalf. So everything is tied up to my GitHub push and my regular developer workflow instead of having to also remember to build my deployment and push it up. So before we go into the details, since that all happened so fast, I'm going to slide back over to my workspace in Prefect Cloud and show you that this deployment is now here, right? And so I didn't personally do any Prefect deployment build myself. I didn't run that CLI command myself. That happened as part of the GitHub workflow. And clicking in here, I'll also highlight that there is a tiny little, can you see that on the screen? Tiny little section down here for my deployment version. You'll see this commit 0b9 blah, blah, blah. That, if you recall, is the commit hash for the commit that I pushed up. So we have a little piece of sort of tracing here between what is happening in my version control for my Prefect deployments and what is going on in my actual Prefect cloud. So we can kind of connect those dots. So that's the fast version of what's going on. Hopefully you can kind of see how, as a matter of your developer flow, you can give the power to make changes to flows in developers' hands. They don't need to know more details about like how to interact with Prefect Cloud to and the CLI to send deployments to it. They can just do their regular old GitHub workflow, and GitHub Actions can take the load off there. So let's go through that in a little bit more detail. I'm going to pull up the Sublime text over here into this view so we can take a look at what exactly these look like. So let me start over here. So the flow itself is this in this file, basicflow.py, has this very basic setup of having this one flow that just logs things. So not too exciting, but I want to highlight that it's a function that has this name and that it's in this file called basicflow.py because those are going to be referenced in our configuration for the GitHub action. And the other thing I want to highlight is that there's this file called requirements.txt in here. This is also going to be used by the GitHub action to make sure that the environment that the GitHub action is running in on like GitHub servers has the requirements that it needs. So in this case, we need to have Prefect, of course. And then all the other magic is inside this directory structure called inside.github. There is a folder called workflows, and then you can create a YAML file in here, name it whatever you want. This is all also documented on GitHub's website, specifically regarding GitHub Actions. So how this is working is that the GitHub Actions infrastructure that's going to run these steps for you is looking in repos for files that describe workflows like this in this directory structure. So the YAML file itself follows a prescribed set of like keys and values to basically configure how the GitHub action runner is setting up its environment, when it should trigger. So in this case, it's triggering whenever there is a pull request closed into the main branch, or if there's a push to the main branch. So that's what I used. I pushed up directly to the main branch, and that's my privilege here during demo times, right? But probably more likely people will be configuring this on pull requests. Needs to set a couple permissions on the repo itself. And then the big like chunky part here is inside here for jobs. You set up some information about how the runner should be configured in terms of how long until it should time out, what type of image it should run on top of, what its name is. That's the name that we saw over in the GitHub Actions view for this job. So you'll see it again a couple times, build and apply deployment. And then everything is described in different steps. So steps themselves can have names. They can use a predefined step that is available in the GitHub Marketplace. So here there's two predefined steps, action/checkout and action/setup Python that are being used in this YAML. So I'm going to slide back over to Chrome and in particular click into at GitHub. There's this github.com/marketplace. There's apps and stuff in here too, but I'm clicked into the actions, and this is where you can look up what actions you can reference in that uses keyword. So we're using, for example, checkout is how you spell that. So here in the sort of actions org here, there's this action called checkout, and what it does is check out your repository, et cetera, right? So it explains here what all of the environment variables that it sets and what configuration it needs. So in our case for this one, we're setting the fetch depth to 0, which just configures that it takes like all the history of the repo and persist credentials false about whether it's going to persist a GitHub token inside the runner so that you can so the runner itself rather can do authenticated GitHub commands, like if you have a private repo or something. So both of these are cases where it's one of those GitHub Marketplace actions, and you just configure them based on whatever the configuration is for the marketplace action. So we need the runner to have the code, right? And we need the runner to have Python, right? So those are those two steps. And then this step here, install packages, this is more in the style of if you want to describe something custom that's not part of an existing GitHub action. You can use this run keyword and pass in CLI commands that should be run in like the in the terminal of this runner. In this case, like we already set up Python in the prior step, so we'll have access inside the runner to the Python executable. So you can see here that we're upgrading pip to make sure we have the latest, and then also squeeze over here, pip installing everything in requirements.txt, right? So this is being run in the context of this checkout that occurred up here. So we're in the root of this entire repo from the perspective of the GitHub runner, and that's where this requirements.txt is coming from. So this is going to make sure that we have Prefect on this runner, and then we are ready to actually build and apply deployment, because now we have access to the Prefect CLI, and we can actually have it run our deployment build. Here you can see I'm referencing that basic flow that I showed you earlier. It's a file that has this name. The flow itself has this name. And then you can name your deployment. Skipping this for a second, you can add any tags that you want. This is like the just classic Prefect deployment build CLI command, but you're controlling it here in your GitHub action. So it will always have this tag applied. You can set what work queue that it should be associated with. And then this part here, this -v, this is how we're getting a hold of the commit hash. So this environment variable is generally available to you inside your GitHub action. So this will be filled in with the commit hash for the code that got checked out back in step 1. And so that's what's going to be added to the version string for this deployment and Prefect. Then the other thing here, you're going to specify what the storage block is for these flows. So here I'm saying that it's this GitHub/test. That's the block that I made at the beginning, referencing the back over in. Let me go there just to make sure we're on the same page. This block here that I created over in Prefect that knows some metadata about what branch we're talking about and in what repository. So I'm setting that as the storage block for this deployment. So this whole thing here, oh, I didn't mention, let me just mention this really quick too. So another thing that you can set in GitHub Actions is you can like interpolate some templated stuff. So outside of, if I scroll down here again, outside of these sort of general things that are available, as environment variables in the case of the GitHub runner, there's also things that you set, for example, over in that secrets context. And these Prefect API key, Prefect API URL, that is what I set back in my settings at the beginning here. Over in secrets actions, these are the two repository secrets that it's referencing there. So this secret stash here is what GitHub Actions has context to know where it's actually deploying to. So this whole thing, this is what describes how this action should occur and on what triggers. So we triggered it on pushing to the main branch directly, and then you can see that these steps here are kind of recognizable now that you saw the YAML, right? So it actually did the checkout action. It set up Python based on our step. It installed our packages, and then here it actually did the build and apply deployment. So you'll see that it has the regular output here from Prefect deployment build, but again, we didn't have to do it. We made the GitHub Actions worker do it. And then you can put in hooks to close out other actions before it completes the job as well. So there's some output, or at least the holders for that here. So that's the details about how to set up the GitHub action, like how we're connecting some different pieces of configuration on different sides. But once you have this workflow set up the way that you like, then again, you can just leave your devs to it. You can make it part of your regular workflow. You can make this trigger after pull requests are merged so that it can happen without any extra development time. It's just part of this existing GitHub Actions. Okay, so I want to segue a little bit to Another example that uses a couple other pieces of Prefect at the same time, because I want to talk about Prefect collections I mentioned too. So let me grab my commits from that and go through a few changes that I've made and see how this could sort of affect how you're setting up your GitHub Actions too. So first off, I'm going to show you here that the major change that I've made inside my deployment YAML is that I'm referencing a different flow. So I'm going to show you what's up with this flow. But I have this AWS flow, and this is called hello upload, right? I've changed the name, but everything else, I'm pretty sure, just a little scroll here. Yeah, everything else is the same. So I'm still using all my other GitHub Action setups. So this is basically how I'm setting up a trigger to deploy a different flow. So if you have many flows that you want to be triggered by different GitHub Actions, you could just create another workflow YAML file in here with your other information here. I overwrote the same one, but you can do it that way. And as long as you of course, change what your build target is, then it will work for your other flow. So let's take a quick look over here at AWS Flow, and I'm going to mention some other stuff more detailed about this in a second, but I just want to highlight that this is a flow that has this hello upload flow. It has it basically is going to upload some stuff to a S3 bucket, is the thrilling thing it's able to do, but it has some references to this package called Prefect _ AWS. So Prefect _ AWS is a Prefect collection. So I'm going to jump over there to show you about that in a second. But the important thing is, since my flow is using this other things that are inside this other package, it's really important that I go update my requirements.txt so that my GitHub Actions runner has this context, since it's going to execute this flow file as part of the build operation, right? So here I put in my reference to Prefect AWS. Whoops, sorry. Let me open up my AWS flow. And that's what the pip install reference is for this package. So want to point that out here in terms of, as you're making more complicated flows and making more complicated GitHub runners, to make sure that you're connecting the dots between what the runner environment needs to have access to compared to what your flow is, what is actually being built in Prefect deployment build. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about the Prefect collections, which is what this reference is. So let me jump over back to Chrome, because I have open over here the docs for this collection called Prefect AWS. So this is basically a one-stop package, like pip installable package for stuff that Prefect needs to do AWS stuff, right? So it's a nice way to kind of encapsulate all of that, and it also includes some useful tasks, some sort of builder flows. And there's some documentation in here about some different variations of using that. So I'm going to scroll here in a second to show you what I used, but just to connect all of the dots, if you head over to the Prefect docs and click on this tab up here that says integrations, this is the homepage for all the collections, right? So here's the whole catalog. It's being added to all the time, right? But there's a bunch of different collections in here, again, that package up everything that Prefect needs to do these, and also eliminate some of the boilerplate code that you might need to write by instead providing it either through direct tasks that have been defined in this package, or flows that have been defined in this package, or through the documentation for each individual collection. So slidey slide, there's a ton of these here. So, if you want to integrate with Slack, or you want to integrate with, I think this Monte Carlo one is the hot newest one based on the changelog for the latest version of Prefect. So tons of stuff in here. And I'm using the AWS one to interact with my AWS account to showcase using this collection, and using yet another block over in the Prefect Cloud to tie the pieces together so that my deployments know what they're up to. So again, here on the Prefect AWS page, I'm going to scroll down here to show you that here's where I got that reference for what I needed to actually pip install as part of my requirements.txt. You'll also need this locally in your local like Conda or pipenv or whatever environment if you're going to be running or building these flows locally. And then you will need some AWS credentials, of course, and I'm going to show you how I reference those in my code, and also using using Prefect blocks. And then there's some examples here of how to utilize some of the pieces that are provided to you from this collection. So I'm going to kind of direct your attention here. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Not that big. Direct your attention here that in Prefect AWS.S3 in this module, there's something called S3 upload. So this is like a convenient wrapper around some of the around the AWS client, basically, so that you don't have to write anything directly with the AWS client. Instead, you can take advantage of this, convenient function here, S3 upload, just pass in the metadata that you care about most directly inside your flow, the bucket you're sending to, what the key should be for it, what the actual data is, and then your credentials. And then this will upload something to S3 on your behalf, again, without you needing to interact with the AWS client directly in your flow code. I'm actually using a variation of this case, I believe. Oh, actually, no, I am using a variation of this one. So let me stay focused over here for the deep dive, but I will just mention that there's some other examples in this Prefect AWS collection, including how to use an S3 bucket object as opposed to this wrapper function here. So this is like a different level of abstraction, a little closer to the AWS client. And then there's two examples down here about how to use min.io credentials instead of, for example, using the AWS block in Prefect directly. You can use a min.io credentials block instead to reference your min.io server. So that's kind of like just a quick little dirty preview of how there might be some variations in each of these collections depending on how you want to deploy it. But again, I'm going to focus on this one here for Prefect using this S3 upload wrapper function. So I want to highlight here that in this example, two things are going on basically. One is that we use the S3 upload function I keep referring to here to wrap the actual operation of uploading this file to this S3 bucket. But right in here, it needs to take your AWS credentials, right? Like it needs to know like where are we going and like what's our authorization to do it. And up here is where the example is showing how these AWS credentials are set. And here, it kind of looks sort of hard-coded, but what we're going to do is instead of having, the strings hard-coded right here, we're going to use a prefect block to grab these dynamically from Prefect Cloud at runtime. So this highlighting here again, this is the part that's going to be different in the example I'm actually going to show you. So let's jump over to my Sublime text to actually see that. And unfortunately, it's taking up quite a lot of room here, but this is where all of this is where that's a little bit different in my example, right? So in this case, instead of having this hard-coded or pulled from an environment variable or some other like custom to me way to get a hold of this that might be specific to my execution runtime, I'm pulling this from a block that I am just about to create in Prefect Cloud. So let's go over and create this named S3 block over in Prefect Cloud. So then it will be obvious how we're getting a hold of all of these inside my flow. So I need to, drop over to Chrome and head back to my workspace and head back to my block list. And in here, I'm going to look for the S3 one. So this is how I'm going to specify the credentials that are needed. An S3 block also takes a block name, as all blocks do. And then the specific things for S3, it takes the bucket path, the AWS access key, and the secret access key, so you could store them here if you wanted to. So I am going to do that. I have my little references over here of what those should be. So I have some temporary, here we go, access key, and I have here, if I don't mess up the copy paste, my secret access key, and then I'm also going to hop over here to show you that I have this bucket called Cloud22 demo. And this is going to be the bucket name that I need to drop into my S3 block. So I'm just going to put it right in the root of my bucket, but you could, like, you know, whatever, say some other directory in here. And then I need to give my block a name. I referenced it over here as demo bucket. So I'm just going to go with the flow of what I had said in my flow. But if you had given this block some other name, of course, you would change the slug referenced over here. So let me create that. So now I have over in my blocks an S3 block that now is storing all of that information in Prefect Cloud. So over here, what's going on kind of top to bottom, we are using the this reference of to prefect.filesystems S3 to load the block that I just created in Prefect Cloud that has this name demo bucket into this variable S3 underscore block. And you'll see that S3 underscore block is referenced here for my AWS credentials, for my access key and my secret access key, which I just set there, and down here for my bucket, right? So now this flow is dynamic against what is set in that block, right? So you can go over to your cloud UI and update those blocks. If your configuration changes, you don't need to change your flow anymore because it's referencing those directly. So here I'm setting my AWS credentials. Inside my S3 block object, there is this attribute AWS access key ID. I want to highlight that these themselves are Pydantic secret string type. So if you need to use it as an actual string, which is what the S3 upload function ultimately, once it gets down to the AWS client, really needs, you'll need to pull out the actual string value from it using this get secret value method. So this is more like a Pydantic detail, but I want to highlight that if you see any like, this is the wrong type, I need str type thing, and you're dealing with things that you like secret type things that you put up into Prefect Cloud, they're obfuscated using by Pydantic secret string. So this is the way to get them out. And then lastly, the other thing I referenced my block here for was my bucket path, right? So I added that instead of it being hard coded in here, I'm pulling that from my block. And this one isn't of type secret string because it's not so secrety. So this one doesn't have the same issue where it comes to that for using it inside your flow code. Okay, so that is this new AWS flow. So why don't we go ahead and kick off my GitHub action by pushing this to main so that it will actually create my deployment over in Prefect Cloud. So, and I already made this in the oven ahead of time, so we can git push this, go over here, get ready to see my new deployment in here shortly, but proof that it wasn't here before, right? Nothing up my sleeve. And head back over to my actions view just so we can take a look at my my GitHub action as it's progressing. So we can click into the actual job and take a look at how it's going, right? So now we're seeing all the steps a little bit in detail. Right now it's installing all the packages we need. And somewhere in here, if we are feeling excited about reading all of this, output is going to mention all the AWS stuff. Woo, we are moving right along all the AWS stuff that we installed. Looks like some stuff is truncated here, but here we go. You can see that there's a reference to this package that I added to my requirements.txt. Come on, GitHub Actions, I'm talking to people here. Right here we have this reference that I added to my requirements.txt, and that's why the GitHub Actions runner is going to know to install this so that it can load my flow properly. So we've completed our job. Let's go back over to our deployments and give this a refresh. And we will see that, again, just by doing a git push, I have my hello upload flow deployment pushed up here. It has its deployment version 9A6. Let's go back to terminal and take a look at our commit hash 9A6, et cetera, et cetera. So looks like it's all good. So that is a little bit more about Prefect collections, how you can leverage them inside your flow code, and then gives us another opportunity to talk about some more detailed GitHub actions, making sure that your runner is configured properly. So I'm going to take a break on the GitHub action stuff so I can talk about those other things I wanted to mention as new features. Let me check my notes again over here, make sure I mention it all. Okay, so two cool things that are added for org tier of Prefect Cloud. We'll take a look over here. So I'm in Prefect Cloud, right? And I clicked here on my little org button because I am in Martha's org. And in here, you can see that I have kind of these two nav pieces over here is what I want to mention, the audit log and SSO. So audit log is a, well, let me click on it and show it to you. Audit log is a basically series of kind of simply defined events in terms of like what sort of like the namespace of the event, like the category, and then what's some sort of like verb that happened, like created or user logged in or like deleted or something. But here you can see tracking of when certain of these types of events occurred, and there's kind of these built-in audit log actions that are relevant to Prefect Cloud, like when an API key is created, when a workspace is created or deleted, when a user accepted an invitation, and also when it was created. So there's all sorts of information in here that on the one hand is just useful for, observability of your org and like how things are going in terms of these regular actions. This is a system here that eventually we'll get to the point where you can react based on things that happened in your audit log. You can send your own types of events to your audit log. So this is kind of like first variation here that can give you some observability into what's going on inside your GitHub org. And you can take a look at the like Prefect Cloud tiers, but I think by default for like the org tier, the audit log is like 72 hours, I think. But you can upgrade to turn it on at any time or and get access to your prior audit log whenever you want. So this is probably useful for people who have like bigger organizations and deployments of Prefect Cloud that might be a bit more distributed, and this could be a useful feature for you. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention is here in SSO. So another kind of like larger org nice feature added to cloud recently is a way to integrate SSO enforcement. So if you want to make all of your users have to log in with whatever your SSO, I'm going to show you basically with Gmail, Google Workspace, but there's a couple different providers that are integrated with, and it's really easy self-serve, like you can configure it for your Prefect Cloud account just from this view. So basically you'll come in here to SSO and you need to establish a connection between with your identity provider. So you'll come here to this generate link button, and this will give you a link to set up your SSO enforcement using WorkOS. So let's go over here and take a look at that. And I've clicked on this link before, so it knows what provider I'm interested in. But when you first go to this, it will ask you what identity provider you want in some like more modally looking like this. So again, I have clicked into the Google SAML because my domain is hosted on Google Workspace. But you can see that there's a lot of other identity providers that you could integrate with, whichever one that you're using. So if you're using Rippling, or if you're using Azure, there's all sorts of integrations, and this is kind of like provided by this WorkOS integration. And so there's tons of identity providers that you can use. And you can just go through this wizard to set up the integration between your Prefect Cloud account and whatever your identity provider is. And then after that, people won't be able to log in with alternative logins within your Prefect account, Prefect Cloud account. So they can't just like make their own random password and like be separated from whatever your org policies are in terms of security on top of whatever your SSO provider is. You can enforce that everybody needs to get into your Prefect Cloud with your like super legit identity provider setup. So that's another thing that's cool over here. Again, useful for the orgs who need to maintain a better security profile around how things are going. So I am a few minutes over what I promised I would go, but that is everything that I wanted to show you today, and I'm happy to talk about any of this in more detail, or show it again. But hopefully you got some good ideas about how you could use GitHub Actions to simplify your Prefect deployment pipeline, especially if you have a larger amount of devs, a larger organization. And in the same vein, how you could use some of these new features on top of the Prefect organizations or enterprise tier to keep track of what's going on in your Prefect Cloud account. So there you have it. Yay.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. That was wonderful. Lots of great stuff there. Hope everyone enjoyed it. And if you want to catch it again in the future, we'll get it up on YouTube before too long. All right. Have fun building with Prefect, y'all. Thank you, Laura.
Cool. Fun to hang. Fun to Prefect, of course.